Are they? Recently, I've been thinking about what might be called modern Gnosticism, which is more of a movement, definitely not a cult or a denomination or some kind of subcategory of a world religion. Philosophical, liturgical, uh, clerical, if that's such a word, clerical movement. Um, it's important to realize that modern Gnosticism has roots going back centuries um, to the Gnostic Gospels and to the early Christian practices and even liturgy to an extent, and certainly organization. Stefan Euler gave a very good lecture in Austin, Texas, about answering the question, why does Ecclesiastica Gnostica, one of the Gnostic churches, for all intents and purposes, look exactly like the Roman Catholic Church? And he said, that we celebrate the seven sacraments. We celebrate the Eucharist, and because this is what the early church did, and the early church, before it sort of splintered, before it became Orthodox versus Gnostic, it was pretty much a spectrum, a broad spectrum of beliefs, practices, norms, values, and theologies. But basically, you had a bishop and you had priests, you had dioceses, and you had a sort of mobile command structure. I mean, not a democracy or an anarchist commune, but certainly pretty a simple organization, hierarchical in the sense that that you've got your bishops, your archbishop, and you've got your pope, and you've got your priests and lower sort of church helpers, as it were, and so that things don't fall apart, so the organisation is kept pretty tight, but pretty mobile as well, because of it. You have to duck and hide from the Romans, and from other persecution. So it's got to be kind of tight organisation, but also mobile, and quite largely decentralized, despite having the Vicar of Rome in charge. Uh, no, infallibility didn't come till much later, centuries later, in fact, the idea of infallibility of the Pope. So, it was kind of a bit more fluffy, I think, in the early days of the church, really. A bit more informal, a bit more, well, obviously less connected to the state. In fact, not connected to the state at all. In fact, being persecuted by the state largely, right up until Constantine, anyway. Although there were edicts of toleration before Constantine. So, you've got the Gnostic roots there in the early church, and you've got the connection to the Gnostic Gospels, as now we more fully understand them and have more Gospels since 1945. So that's good. We've got these sort of roots on one hand, but I mean, it would be disingenuous actually to Gnosticism to not point out it's been influenced by Samkhya philosophy of Hinduism, theosophy, Buddhism, a lot of Buddhism, even to humanism, even to extent rationalism, which is sort of Cartesian philosophy. That's what I mean by rationalism, and basically, lots of modern ideas. So it's pretty eclectic over the centuries, and that's good, and that means that we don't have a cult in Gnosticism. There is a broad spiritual religious movement, And nothing is written in stone, and yet you can really go back to the roots of early Christianity with Gnosticism, if you want. But given all the modern influences, and not modern influences, but influences over the centuries of Gnosticism, and with the Romanticism of the 19th century and the interest in magic and psychicism as well. Although I don't personally really approve much of magic or occultism in the context of Gnosticism, really. But they have been very influential, and so what can we actually say? There's 5 conclusions and 5 injunctions to the would-be modern Gnostic. And I think one of the things that also Gnosticism is rooted is this mind-body dualism, but also matter-spirit dualism, that matter is evil and spirit is good. And that you can sort of placard that, as it were, and trot that out. It in fact, it would take you many books to explain that statement. But generally speaking, I think the modern view in Gnosticism is the world is as it is. It's a mixture of nice and nasty. And so nice and nasty and a whole lot of in between. And I like that statement, the world is as it is. It kind of, the actual phrase is as it is sort of rolls off. It kind of rolls off the tongue, and it's like the world rolls off your shoulders, and you wear the world lightly, as it were, as a loose garment around you. You're not, that's all you can ultimately say, is the world is as it is. And from that, you go to the other conclusion that it's best not to get too emotionally involved, and to remain calm. And because you need to remain objective if you're going to help people in the world. If you get too emotionally involved in the whole thing, in everything that's wrong with the world, including all the sort of contradictions of this world, and absurdities of this world, and cruelties of this world, then you're going to send yourself mad. Literally mad. And of course, the other thing to remember is that I don't personally believe in conspiracy. I believe in messing up and opportunism, which arises naturally. And the fact is that if you imagine that we're all basically like carriages or cars on a train, and we're all connected together. And the back of the train is pushing the front of the train forwards, and as well as the front of the train is also pulling all the cars forward as well. But no one car can actually get off the rails and say, I'm going off the grid, although some people might go off the grid, but only a very small number of people. The rest of us are all being pushed along and pulled along the same rail. And it's very hard to stop. Basically, you're being pushed from behind, or you're being pulled from in front. And the other thing I also thought of about this world is a bit like Las Vegas. The gambling, the roulette wheel of Las Vegas, or the wheels, or the blackjack tables. And basically, we're all playing a game of chance, but we all come back to come back for more, because some people win handsomely, and other people lose, but they keep on coming back because they think that they can beat the bank, they can break the bank at Monte Carlo, which of course isn't in Vegas, but you know what I mean. And they don't realise the bank always wins, the dealer always wins, but because some people have won so much money, that we all sort of feel hopeful. And it isn't hopelessness that's the main enemy, it's hope, as John Cleese said. Hope is the worst thing, because you just keep on thinking that things will get better, and you lose more and more and more, of course, but then sometimes you win. So then that means you think, oh, maybe I'll win again. So you keep on spinning that roulette wheel, or playing the cards, and if you try to cheat, and start counting the cards, well, security will throw you out. And security, I suppose, are the representing the archons of this world, or some of the archons of this world, that make sure you do play the game and don't try to cheat, because they don't like that, because the bank has to win, and the demiurge, who is lord of this world, has to win every time. And so the casino has to win all the time. Otherwise, it couldn't exist, and you wouldn't be able to go on playing the odds, right? But I think if you get emotionally involved with all this and start complaining about how beastly it all is, you will send yourself insane, literally. Like David Icke and Alex Jones, and a lot of his followers and devotees. They actually begin to look at the world as being completely, insanely dark and evil place. But the trouble is with that is that you actually begin to promote evil yourself. So you've got to be quite careful with this doctrine of dualism, that matter is evil, spirit is good, because it's a doctrine which can literally send you insane. Whereas if you say that all you can say is the world is as it is, and matter, and scarcity and fear, and greed are basically just the things of this world, then you can begin to see that also we to a large extent we have a choice about whether we go with nasty or nice, but to a great extent we don't have any choice, and the nasty is pushing us forward, and pulling us forward, and nasty is also pushing us from behind as well. So that we end up being in moral dilemmas, and we can't get out of these moral dilemmas. So we morally compromise. And in compromising, we are, of course, perpetrating the nasty world, which is also mixed up with the niceness of the world. But I suppose, and we come back down here, so the moral here is don't get emotionally involved. But we come down here, and in a very practical sense, hence its attribution to Earth, in a very practical sense, we can help each other. You can love your neighbour as yourself. You can think globally. So there's a global problem of abuse, or scarcity, or famine, or disease, or unfairness, or poor distribution of wealth, or whatever. But you can act locally. So you can act within your neighbourhood to reduce the abuse in your own neighbourhood, to reduce poverty in your own neighbourhood, etc. But more importantly than that is that charity begins at home, and charity means loving your own family. Granted, it says in the Mahabharata that if you love your own children more than other people's children, there will be war, which is an excellent observation, and something to bear in mind as well. But you need to keep a home that is ordered and loving, as it says in the Quran. You need to manage your children's behaviour and attitudes, and you, as a manager, you've got to take responsibility for management. But you should be kind and charitable to your kids and to your spouse, and you need to get your own house in order before you get other people's houses in order in your local area. And of course, as the Dalai Lama says, beyond that, you need to be calm within yourself. You need to be charitable, if you like, to yourself and to the parts of yourself. So that's kind of comes under remain calm and don't get emotionally involved in this world, or in your neighbourhood for that matter. Remain objective, like a physician, like a doctor. Like a medical doctor, if you want to help people, you've got to remain objective. Because if you start panicking, freaking out, and crying with everybody else freaking out around you, you're going to be absolutely no good to anybody. Do you know what I mean? So finally, and this sort of brings Gnosticism really, really into the modern sphere, is the thought and contemplation that most religious language is metaphorical, symbolic, and allegorically instructional. Phew, what a mouthful. Basically, the stories of the Bible have a moral. They're there for instruction. So you were getting away from this literalism and fundamentalism of religion. There really isn't. We're getting away from believing that there really are angels, or there really is a God with a white beard in the sky. We're getting away from all that. Although I do think that there are historical figures that are important in the spiritual life of the species of humankind, and there is a historical Jesus, or perhaps there are several historical figures called Jesus. And there was someone called Enoch and was someone called Elijah. But did they literally not die? And did Elijah literally get borne up to heaven in a fiery chariot? That could be metaphorical language. That could be symbolic. That could have a psychological effect on the listener. I do believe in the power of the placebo effect and the power of suggestion. Like in Wizard of Oz, when the lion puts on a T-shirt with a big letter C on it saying courage, and it gives him courage. Well, I think that's what the placebo effect is about, and that is real. On the other hand, I also think that miracles are real. Sometimes things happen which really, really do defy the laws of physics, of which we are aware at the moment. And maybe suggest a different kind of physics can be in operation over a limited sphere and over a limited period of time. So temporarily, the laws of physics can be reversed. But miracles don't necessarily mean that there is an old man in the sky with a white beard, and it doesn't mean that there is life after death. And it doesn't mean, and the fact is, historical Jesus doesn't mean quite everything that people think it means. So you have to be careful of what all these stories imply. So that's kind of a modern view, I suppose, really, a post-rationalist view, a post-enlightenment view, I suppose, really. We're sort of wary, if you like, of believing in literal things like angels and purgatory and hell and heaven. And yet, miracles do happen. There are historical figures like Jesus. And he did perform miracles of healing. And as a spiritual healer, I've seen some things which are miraculous as well. And there is such a thing as a placebo effect as well, which is powerful, and not to be devalued simply because it's a placebo effect. It's very powerful and it does work, and it could explain a lot of the so-called miraculous. And it also does mean that the connection between mind and body is much closer than the rationalists would have you believe, and that's also significant as well. And it's even possible to affect quantum behavior of quantum particles with your mind, and sometimes, all other things being equal, that can have a physical effect, an effect on the physical and even the cosmic order of things. But we shouldn't get too carried away with that, and we should remain incredibly skeptical and incredibly wary, and also mindful of the fact that we can be deceived by ourselves and by other people seeking power. And also who have have psychological issues. I mean, I had a terrible experience one day. I got so stressed and so distressed that I thought that my house was burning down. And I mean, I could actually see the flames and smell the smoke, and it really, really was burning, and that was due to my stress. But you could say that on one level, my house was burning. And it was a sort of my experience of the house burning basically was sort of signposting the fact that I was incredibly stressed and I should do something about it. And you can take the symbol of the house and symbol of the flames, and you could apply that to your own psychological state. So that's all interesting as well. But with regard, I don't think metaphysics is dead exactly. It can be explained psychologically, it can be explained symbolically, and all that. But I think that if we go within, we can find the answer, possibly. It's not guaranteed that we'll find the answer, but I think, and also assumes that there is an answer to be found, of course. But when we go within, we go within to find the answer, and we may be successful in finding the answer if we go within. And the answer may be what people have called metaphysical, in the sense that it is otherworldly, and miraculous, and has nothing to do with the laws of physics of this world. And the answer could be basically as esoteric and ethereal as you like. There really is a transcendental God, and there really is a transcendental world, and it's really possible to experience in some way the transcendental realms as if they were the realms that you experienced in this life, on this dimension, and we can survive death, and death is a translation from one state of consciousness to another. But I'm not going to say that this is true or false. I am just going to say that it's possible to go within to find the answers to your questions, and even to create questions where you didn't have them before, and maybe frame the right questions which you should be asking, which mystics and religious people don't normally ask, or have neglected to ask, or haven't known how to ask the questions as well. So I put all these 5 points together in a pentagram, which represents modern Gnosticism, and I think it's a good basis really to sort of welcome newcomers to Gnosticism, newcomers who might be quite humanist, and not at all, and even agnostic. And it's a way, despite being a humanist or agnostic or skeptic, you can look at each of these points and say, well, these points actually could have a direct bearing on my life as it is now. Never mind the hereafter or heaven or whatever. I could actually get some benefit from contemplating these 5 points, benefit in my life now as it is, and benefit myself and my family and my neighborhood right now. And if you can take away something positive from these 5 points, then that's great. It doesn't really, I don't know if it makes you a Gnostic. Gnosticism, somebody said isms lead to schisms. And there's all lots of different opinions within Gnosticism. It is a broad spectrum of beliefs, practices, norms, values, etc., as a lot of religions are. But I've tried to pin down the 5 things that everybody can take away, regardless of their religious upbringing, for example, and their religious culture. Because I don't think we should go against people's religious culture necessarily, not in whole anyway. You can't go around telling people their religion is wrong. You might criticize parts of their religion, but you can't just demand that they give everything up and, I don't know, follow some kind of broad Gnostic definition, which, as I say, is extremely fluid anyway, and non-dogmatic. So it might be that people need to hold on to their dogmatism and dogmas. Okay, it gives them a sort of an anchor to reality, but around the edges of this reality, as rigidly defined, they can contemplate and be a little bit more fluid in the way that they look at the world. So certainly, I'm going to take away these 5 points, and with a view to trying to help myself in the modern age as a so-called modern Gnostic, as it were, and hopefully apply these 5 points to myself and to my life and to my family and to my relationship with the universe and with the world as it is, and try to come to a bit more of a chilled out sort of attitude, really, to cultivate this kind of chilled out attitude, so that eventually, on the practical level, I can, come off my Prozac and Tegretol, and start to really mend psychologically, rather than going down the Alex Jones, David Icke paranoia path, which can only lead to total insanity, which is where I was going, for definite, for sure. And like a lot of people kind of find themselves getting kind of entrapped in negativity, because they want to become world saviors. And it doesn't work like that. So if you're like me, and you're kind of struggling with your religious spiritual path, then I hope that these sort of 5 pointers can help you to make some sense of where you're going spiritually.